The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to another Directions Media webinar sponsored by us at Directions Media and by the Pennsylvania State University. Today's webinar is entitled The New Geospatial Jobs and How to Be Ready for Them. Hi, my name is Joe Francica. I am the Editor-in-Chief and Vice Publisher of Directions Media, and I'll also be your host for today's webinar. And I'll be joined by Wes Stroh, a lecturer at Penn State, who will moderate our panel of speakers. The topics we will cover in today's webinar include the new job designations by the U.S. Department of Labor, the recently approved Geospatial Technology Competency Model, which is a model to explore the essential elements required by today's geospatial professionals, and the jobs workforce, the demand for professionals, the job positions, and validation of our profession. I'll just remind everybody that in the future, our future webinars will include one on October 7th. That will be on mobilizing geospatial data, one sponsored by Sybase, and then another on October 13th by NAVTech and ADCI on topics related to emergency management and response. Coming up on your screen next will be a map that will show just how wide our distribution of attendees are today. We have a rather global audience of people that are from about 10 different countries in addition to the U.S. Again, we have about 820 people. That's a fantastic number who are registered today. And again, I want to say thanks for joining us, and we'll honor your time by sticking to our 1 hour time limit and trying to finish within that 1 hour time frame. But before I go into our topic for today, I want to discuss some of the housekeeping issues that will allow you to participate more fully. In your control panel, there is a section called Questions. You can click on the plus sign and type in a question. You may do this at any time during the webinar, and we'll respond to as many of them in the Ask the Experts panel session at the end of the webinar. Whatever questions we do not field during the allotted time, we will be sure to answer after the webinar via email, so please don't hesitate to submit your questions. As I mentioned, again, we have over 800 people registered, and we thank you for joining us today, but we may not have time to answer all the questions that we get in real time. If you have any technical difficulties, you can use the same interface that you use to ask the questions to send us a message, and we'll try to resolve any problems that you may have. During today's presentation, we will be taking a few polls. The answers you give will be shared with everyone, and we appreciate your response, as it is important to understand your interests and needs. And we'll be getting to that first poll very shortly. Finally, a copy of today's webcasts will be recorded, and anybody who is registered will soon receive an email with instructions on how to view this on demand. But next, what I want to do is offer a few takeaways from today's webinar. Today, with the turmoil in the economy, there is a bright spot for for us in the geospatial profession. That is, there will continue to be, and there is now, demand in the workforce for those with specific skills in utilizing geospatial data and analyzing location-based phenomena. In fact, there is quite a diversity of needs by employers in both government and private industry. Specifically, our panel will identify the skills needed to pursue a career in geospatial technology. If you're an employer, you will be very interested to know about what we in the industry consider critical to be a qualified geospatial technologist, and how you can use some recently developed guidelines to see if candidates are indeed qualified. Lastly, you will hear these guidelines will be used to help define the profession. This was lacking before, and what the Department of Labor has done is essentially validated our technology sector as very important to meet the demands of a growing workforce and sustain the needs of our country. But now what I'd like to do is introduce Wes Stroh. Wes is a lecturer in the John A. Dutton E-Education Institute of the department and the Department of Geography at Penn State, and a member of the faculty in Penn State's Online Geospatial Education Program. Wes is also an instructor for a course entitled The Nature of Geographic Data, which is the introductory course in Penn State's online certificate and master's in GIS, and he's a lead author and instructor of a new course under development entitled Location Intelligence for Business. Wes, I'll now turn the webinar over to you.
Thanks, Joe. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to the first in a series of six webinars brought to you by Directions Media and Penn State. And we're calling this series Inside Geospatial Education and Research. We're here today to talk about jobs, and when you registered for the session today, you told us a little bit about where you're at in your career, but we'd like to share that with everybody else who's in the audience today. And so in just a minute, we're going to take poll number 1 and ask everyone again to indicate where are you in your career. Are you new to geospatial? Are you checking it out as a potential career? Are you currently in a bachelor's program? Maybe you're in an advanced degree program. Maybe you're mid-career and wondering if you're optimally positioned, or something else. So Joe, let's go ahead and start that first poll. We'll give you a couple minutes to answer, and then we'll bring those selections back to you. It looks like we're getting some numbers, and as I anticipated, we've got a lot of mid-career folks. That's what showed up on the pre-registration information as well. Give you just a couple more minutes, a couple more seconds, excuse me.
Yeah, it looks like there's just about everybody has voted, Wes. So I'm going to give everybody maybe just a second or two more, and I'm going to close the poll, and
okay.
Let's share the results of that poll. To
and
everyone
not exactly. Yep. Thanks, Joe. Not exactly a surprise when you folks registered. Most of us told you you were mid-career and wondering if you're optimally positioned. Well, I think that today's content is definitely appropriate for you as we talk a little bit about the geospatial industry and GIS becoming a little more of its own as a profession. And for those of you that are newer or currently in a program, I think you're going to find this helpful in a forward-thinking way as you plan your own careers. So, Joe, why don't we go ahead and turn to our agenda now, and I'll run through that briefly. We're going to start today's call with a colleague of mine, actually my boss, the director of the John A. Dutton E-Education Institute here at Penn State, David DiBiase, who's going to bring to us information about recent developments at the U.S. Department of Labor, the Employment and Training Administration unit. And they've actually put together a geospatial competency model that helps us define our profession in terms of job descriptions and also what competencies are required for those job descriptions. Then we're going to bring Rich Serby into the conversation. He's president and owner of GeoSearch, and he is going to help us a little bit with the ground truth, what's really going on out there in the field in terms of hiring. Then we're going to follow up with the Q&A panel asking the experts at the end. So first, as I indicated, David DiBiase, director of the Dutton E-Education Institute. He's also the program manager for the Online GIS and Geospatial program here at Penn State, and is currently serving as the president of the GIS Certification Institute. Again, David's going to bring to us information about the new Geospatial Competency Model, and I'll turn it over to you at this point, David. Thanks.
Thank you, Wes, and I want to thank Joe and Nora, our partners at Directions Media, for co-hosting with Penn State University this series of webinars on Inside Geospatial Education and Training. I especially want to thank our participants, very nearly 400 online right now. I want to thank you for carving out some time in your day, and I can assure you we're going to do our utmost to make it worth your while. I'm confident that whether you are new to one of the geospatial professions or if you're a mid-career professional like so many of you are thinking about your career trajectory, that the developments at the recent developments at the Department of Labor in the United States are going to be important and interesting to you. First of those two developments is that not very long ago at all, just on July 8th of this year, 2010, the Department of Labor culminated really a 10-year-long quest to reach a consensus definition of the field it calls geospatial technology. And the culmination of that quest was, in part, its publication of a geospatial technology competency model. What's showing on the screen right now is a screen capture of a website that the Department of Labor hosts called its Competency Model Clearinghouse. And we're going to visit that Competency Model Clearinghouse very shortly and take a quick look at the Geospatial Technology Competency Model live. The second development that's going to be important to you for sure is the fact that within the past year, just in December 2009, the Department of Labor established 6 new geospatial occupations. Folks in the field have been complaining for a long time that the Department of Labor, which is a busy group of people, had not gotten around to establishing standard occupation codes that realistically reflect the geospatial field. Well, now it's harder to make that argument. What you see now is the list of 10 occupations directly related to geospatial that are now recognized by the U.S. Department of Labor. Those in asterisks are the ones that were newly established just in December of 2009. And we'll go to the Department of Labor website in just a few minutes and take a look at where you can find descriptions of these new standard occupations. And not only are there descriptions, but the Department of Labor's workforce analysts have actually estimated current employment, that is employment as of 2008, and as well projected growth in employment over the next 10 years, 2008 to 18, and that has to be of great importance to all of us in the field. And this gives us an opportunity to move to our second poll. You see I have question marks in there. Before revealing those estimates, I think it would be fun if we as a group were to express our opinion about our guess, our estimate of the size in number of workers of the entire U.S. geospatial workforce. So on the low end, you might estimate that it's 100,000 workers. On the high end, 1 million workers, or something in between. Why don't you, let's take a moment now, and here's the poll showing up, the quick poll. Why don't you select one of the following that's your best guess about the size of the geospatial workforce, and after taking a moment or two, Joe will show us some results, and then we'll go on and see what the Department of Labor says.
And we've got about 75% of those folks who have voted right now. And again, we'll just leave it over for a few more seconds to get hopefully close to 100% of everybody that's participating in today's webinar. As again, this type of poll really gives us a good sense of where you think the profession is. So I'm going to go ahead now and close this poll, and we'll share the results with everyone who has participated. And we'll be interested to see exactly what kind of those results we get.
Yeah, indeed. Well, they're showing up on my screen, and I hope everybody else can see. What I see in the responses is that there's the responses are equivocal. But there is a kind of a central tendency, if you will, and most people feel that the size of the geospatial workforce is somewhere between 250,000 and 500,000 people in the United States. There are others who think it's much higher, and there are others who think it's lower. So now let's see what the Department of Labor has said. Well, here's that same table I just showed you, only with the employment estimates and projected growth added. And if you scroll your eyes down to the bottom, you'll see that the total estimated population for workforce in 2008 was over 850,000 people. And that's, to most of us, that's a fairly amazing number. And even more amazing, perhaps, is the Department of Labor's estimate that over the next 10 years, an additional 340,000 workers in these 10 occupations will be needed. It's a remarkable number. It is, we all here in the webinar kind of guessed in advance that this would be high relative to the estimates. And we can, of course, there's lots we can discuss about where these numbers come from and how reliable they might be. And our colleague Rich Serby is going to have some things to say about that in a few minutes. But right now, I think it's a good time for us to leave these slides, and we're going to go live right now. And in a minute, I hope you're going to see. Let's see. I hope you're going to see my screen. Somebody let me know if we're seeing it. You're going to see my browser screen. Is that showing up, Joe?
I think that's good, David. Yeah, I think you're ready to go.
Yep, you got it. Okay, great. So here's what we're doing, and you know, you can follow along at home. What we're going to do is now go visit the Department of Labor's website, 2 websites actually, but first we're going to start at the Competency Model Clearinghouse. And it's really easy to find. You see up in the upper right-hand corner of the browser that I have a Google window, and I'm just going to type in Competency Model Clearinghouse. Okay, and I'm going to search on that. And what you should find is right at the top is this website hosted by the United States Department of Labor. So let's go there. And here we are. If you've been, as many of you indicated you have been, if you've been in this field for a while, you should take some pride in the fact and feel some excitement about the fact that now, just within the last few months, that listed among these high-growth industries for which competency models have been developed by the Department of Labor, that included among those industries is our own geospatial technology. It's a real milestone for our field, I do believe. Let's go look and see what the Geospatial Technology Competency Model looks like. Now, you're going to want to spend more time on this on your own. I'm going to give a very, very quick tour of this resource. I want to first of all say that the credit there given to the National Geospatial Technology Center acknowledges the fact that that National Science Foundation funded project provided the support that allowed a panel of practitioners from very diverse backgrounds in geospatial to work with the Department of Labor to complete this model. And so I'm scrolling down now, and we're going to see the model. This is really just a graphic depiction of the model, and this is the standard Department of Labor framework. The competency model framework that the Department of Labor uses is a tiered approach to competency modeling that begins with really rather generic competencies, personal effectiveness, academic competencies, and workplace competencies. The ones in gray and pink are those competencies that are tend to be applicable across a great number of industries, not just geospatial. There is one exception to our field, though, that it includes a competency category here that I'm putting my pointer over, and we're going to go look at, and that is a competency specifically for geography. I clicked on that now, and when you click on this model, you'll see that you can go in and actually look at the list of knowledge, skills, and abilities associated with each of those topics. I also want to point out, if I can scroll down a little further, that you can also well, let me back up a moment. You can also download this document as a PDF file, and here are those links to get other documents, so you don't have to just work with it on the web. So the competency model framework at Department of Labor has these 3 what they call foundational levels of competencies that for the most part are not specific necessarily to geospatial. But when we get up to the 4th and 5th tiers of this competency model, we encounter critical work functions that are distinctively geospatial. Let's begin with tier 4. That is the core geospatial abilities and knowledge. Notice that these aren't compartmentalized because these are exemplary competencies that the Department of Labor workforce analysts and a panel of geospatial professionals who validated this model and helped complete it identified as exemplary abilities and knowledge that geospatial professionals of all sorts will either need to know currently or will need to know most likely at some point in their career. And if I scroll down, you'll be able to come back and take a look at the 44 exemplary abilities and knowledge that really characterize or exemplify the nature of expertise in our field. It's we could quibble about the contents of that, and I'm sure that there will be discussion about it. The point is that a list has been developed and has been acknowledged by the Department of Labor to represent our field, and has been validated not just by a set of academics like me, but by practitioners with experience who from a whole diverse array of backgrounds who have come to consensus on the nature of our field. Finally, almost finally, I'm now pointing to Tier 5 of the competency model, and here is where competencies are identified that are sector specific, and the sectors used here are 3: positioning and data acquisition, analysis and modeling, software and application development. And an interesting thing about our field is, although market research tends to use market sectors like this, at least the traditional market research does, uses sectors like this to measure sales of products and services. In this instance, when we're talking about the workforce, really most people who work in our field, and I imagine many of our participants today, the nature of their work and their duties crosses these lines, so that many geospatial professionals have to be expert not only in positioning and data acquisition, but analysis and modeling, and many, increasingly more all the time, need to have expertise in software and application development. And I just clicked on software and application development. You can see the list of exemplary competencies, of critical work functions that many geospatial professionals at some point in their career will encounter and need to master. And so you'll want to come back to this because time doesn't permit us to go into detail. Just one more thing I wanted to show you here. If you notice in the Department of Labor framework that when we start getting into these blue tiers, 6, 7, 8, and 9, you notice that there's nothing written in there, because this is where we stop thinking about industry-wide competencies and begin to think about the nature of expertise for specific occupations, such as the occupations we saw in the chart a few minutes ago. So when you click on this now, I'm going to click on Tier 6. What that does is to generate a search of occupation codes at the Department of Labor's occupational network site. That's ONET Online. And you can go and look at this too. And this shows, this provides for us links to the quite detailed descriptions of occupations related to geospatial. Notice, and this is something else that we should be excited about and take pride in, that geospatial information scientists and technologists, for instance, is designated as what the Department of Labor calls a bright outlook. If you have a young person in your family, or a neighbor's child who's thinking ahead about what they might do as a career, well, this is the kind of thing you could point to with some optimism about future prospects. And it's even designated as green, as are many, as you see, as are many of these occupations. So if we follow this link and jump in and look at what the Department of Labor says about geospatial information scientists and technologists, you'll find enormously detailed and revealing list of tasks, of relevant knowledge, of skills, abilities, work activities. In other words, this occupation, which is really a cluster of job descriptions, that, as Rich will discuss, the occupations align are really more like categories than they are like individual jobs, and we'll discuss that in a moment. But you'll find a lot of relevant information about the nature of that work, which ought to be very useful and again, something that we can take a lot of pride in, of being recognized. It gets really interesting when you drive down here and see what the pay is for these jobs and what the employment is. And here's that estimate: 209,000 employees in this occupation alone in 2008, with an expected need of 72,600 additional employees in the next 10 years. Wow, that's what I said when I first saw these estimates, and I certainly, like most of the people in our participant group today, my estimate had been much lower than what the Department of Labor said. But I think we can, while we can critique those numbers, and we surely will, we can also be, I think, pretty excited about the fact that the Department of Labor's workforce analysts, who are not rookies at this kind of estimation by any means, that they are this encouraged about our field. So at this point, I'm going to switch back over and I'm going to return to Joe, and he's going to return to the slides. And I thank you for your attention to this topic, and it brings us to another poll.
Thanks, David, and thanks for taking us on a little test drive over the competency model. Certainly not enough time to go into great depth on an hour-long call, but hopefully folks will go out and do that themselves. Following up with that, and before we move on to Rich, we'd like you to think a little bit about some of the information you've seen so far. How accurate do you think those Department of Labor estimates are? I was quite frankly surprised when I saw the numbers too, and certainly the amazing amount of growth. So you know, we've got kind of both ends of the spectrum represented in the answers. Is it grossly overestimated or grossly underestimated or somewhere in between? Joe, let's go ahead and hit that poll and see how folks are reacting to those numbers they've seen. And we're about a third of the folks are in now. A lot of numbers coming in. Give you just a few more seconds to respond. Think those numbers are in line or not?
Yeah, and it looks like we've got about 85% of the attendees voted, and we want to thank them for their responses. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, Wes, and share those results.
And so right at half of you think that the numbers are about right. And not too far behind, you're saying that those numbers are actually overestimated. So we've got some folks that think that DOL is right on track, and some other folks that think maybe we're thinking a little bit ambitiously. Well, that's a great entree to our next speaker, Rich Serby, who I guess experiencing his 21st year in business as the president, owner, founder of GeoSearch, which is a personnel recruitment firm in Colorado Springs, Colorado, focusing specifically on the geospatial industry. Rich has a lot of experience in actually hiring and what's going on kind of on the ground. So we're going to turn to Rich for some ground truth and let him suggest, does he think that the DOL is really in sync? Rich, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate very much being invited to participate, and I hope that some of the information that I have to share will be useful, and also hope to get to some of your questions. One of the things that we certainly want to look at is the type of positions that they describe as GIS technicians, and I'm talking about the Department of Labor, and mapping technicians, which have a lot of similarities to them. And what we might see as recruiters, and currently posted, for instance, on our website at geosearch.com, these are the kinds of titles that we have seen that would be related to this level of technologist or technician in 2010. And as you can see, there's a wide variety of job titles that seem to be related to this field. And if we can go to the next slide, that will also illustrate the variety of job titles that are involved. Once again, what we're seeing, organizations, whether they be commercial enterprises or public agencies, will use their own job titles for their specific purpose, and oftentimes will use even a different job title for working purposes when they're advertising a position that may or may not be representative of what they use for their internal administrative purposes. And if we could go on to that next one, the geospatial software programmers is an area that the Department of Labor did not address. And I'm not sure why this category was not addressed or if it will be in the future, but certainly it is representative of the positions that are most in demand and the fastest growing category of all of the positions that we deal with as recruiters. The ability to develop and manipulate software programs within the field as a technician, as a specialist, as an analyst, as a developer is very much increasing. And we can move on to that next slide then. And in the more traditional, when we talk about surveyors and mappers, cartographers, and photogrammetrists, these were addressed by the Department of Labor previously. They continue to be the basis, the foundation of the industry of the geospatial sciences. But here again, what we see are very much representative of the how the technology has developed. We're seeing LiDAR in demand more and more each year. And we're also seeing a very robust return to the employment market here recently as compared to a year ago. So that's good news for all of us. Remote sensing scientists and technologists certainly has been a growth area. Once again, look at the variety of ways in which those are titled, that particular category is titled, which really brings us to the point of it is oftentimes misleading to use a job title as a way to make assumptions about the position, which is why the new competency model pyramid is so important in terms of how we view these things, and it will be continue to be important, I believe, over the next years. We had Tyrone who had asked a question about how are management titles addressed. Well, the simple answer to that is they're not addressed within the geospatial category specifically. The Department of Labor takes categories such as sales and marketing, and those are covered more generically that are intended to be across all industry sectors. And that is what they've done in the sales marketing category. That's what they've done in the management category. So what you will want to do is explore the Department of Labor categories in terms of management competencies and how those are described that are intended to be across all industries. The same holds true with college and universities, research labs, and so forth as a separate Department of Labor category. The importance of the Department of Labor competency models and descriptions really cannot be overstated, because we have for a very long time struggled with how it is we describe specific positions. We have used the term GIS technician as being a sort of a baseline. This would be a person who is proficient in using GIS software, but not at the programming level. And then we have moved up into specialist, and then above and beyond that into scientists and developers, and that category which would include the programming skills. The consistency between what we are seeing in terms of job descriptions and the Department of Labor competency model is important, because many of our colleagues derive their living either working in a public agency at some level, or they are in a commercial company that contracts to public agencies. And the descriptions, the competencies will have a trickle-down effect in terms of how federal, state, and local government agencies will begin to describe the job requirements and competencies required for various positions. And even though we have seen, of course, we were affected by the economy, as was everyone else over this past year or so, but we certainly are seeing a bright improvement in the number of jobs available currently, and we're dealing right now with what we would call a very robust employment situation, and that will be something that we can look forward to as the economy continues to improve. What should you do as a prospective candidate for a position in terms of your own development and how you plan your career? I would certainly use as a baseline the competency pyramid that has been developed, and because you will see with regard to academic programs, certification programs, and the like, that this model will be used in terms of course development, program development, even degree programming. The good news, certainly from our perspective, is that we have seen a threefold increase in jobs that are being posted with us since the same period 1 year ago. The 25% of that has been within just the last 3 months. And my staff and I were talking just within the last few days. The number of new inquiries that we're receiving from employers now is dramatically improved in the first number of months of 2010. City and county and state government agencies are still struggling because they are always behind the curve, as they're the last ones to see the drop-off when the economy is in a downward spiral, and they're the last ones to see the improvement after the economy starts to recover. And so right now we still see that city and county and state government agencies in particular are still struggling with budgets, and the hiring is a bit flat in those sectors. The commercial market right now is very much more active. And we can move on to the next.
And I think, Rich, this is where we're going to pause for a quick poll before we move on to the career planning topics. So we want to give folks just a moment to reflect upon what both you and David have said. So thinking about the competency models, thinking about how those are really matching up to what's going on, that ground truth out in the field. We'd like to ask the audience, how confident do you feel about your career trajectory at this point? So are you really confident about your preparation, or are you kind of winging it, or something in between? So go ahead and respond to that poll. We've got about a third of the folks in, now about half. Folks seem to be really animated about how they feel about this particular topic. 73% in, now about 80. And we'll leave that open just a couple more seconds. We're getting close to the 90% mark. And Joe, why don't we go ahead and close it? And so, some of you feel confident, some of you are winging it, but a good 2/3 nearly, 59%, are considering adding skills, education, and or some kind of certification. And that's exactly what the next little bit of the call is about. We'd like to bring both Rich and David back to talk a little bit about how you can employ some of the topics we've talked about in your future career planning. So I'll hand it back to you guys for just a moment to take a look at long-term career planning.
Okay, this is David. I'll be happy to start out. I just want to emphasize a couple of points rather than try to read through all of the lists. And one is that a field like ours that's changing rapidly and growing and evolving at the pace it's growing and evolving requires most of us in the field to plan for a lifelong commitment to education. And by education I mean the entire range from formal education to informal education. We need to be, this field requires us to be lifelong learners. For some, the solution to that in part might involve university offerings such as the ones we do online at Penn State. For many, many others, though, your local or regional community college is going to be an excellent solution for helping you keep your skills up to date. And I should also say, for quite a few of you experienced practitioners, you may actually be able to give back to the profession by working with a community college as a part-time instructor. And for all of that perspective, I encourage you to visit the Geotech Center at geotechcenter.org to learn more about that. The second thing I'd say, and now I put my hat on as president this year of the GIS Certification Institute, I honestly do believe that professional certification of one sort or another, whether it's licensure for professional surveyors or voluntary certification for photogrammetrists and remote sensing specialists through ASPRS, or GIS professional certification through the GIS Certification Institute. I've gotten involved in this, and I encourage my students to get involved because I believe this is worthwhile, insofar as certification is a kind of commitment to continuing professional development. To that extent, it structures and directs our engagement with lifelong learning in a way that ensures that not only we're going to remain skillful and valuable, but also that our profession will advance. Rich, what are your thoughts?
Well, I certainly agree with everything that you've spoken to. I especially would like to emphasize that when you are involved in career planning, and when you are involved in job search activities, this is very much a human activity. This is not something that can be done simply by sitting at a computer and hoping things will work out for the best. The competencies model, I think, gives us, for the first time since I've been involved with the industry, it really gives us something very specific with quite a lot of detail that we can use as we begin to look at our own profile, our own resume, and what it is we bring to the table. And I think will become very useful for individuals in terms of making some decisions about what is next in that development, whether that be formal education or other kinds of experience. Upgrading and technical and management skills it's a lifelong activity. It never stops, and in a now industry that we would call the geospatial sciences, things progress so rapidly that it is very important that you do what is necessary to do to keep up with it. So through workshops or certificate programs or degree programs, whatever that might be, allows you to make a point with an employer and give that employer some confidence that you have the skills and the abilities necessary to make a good employee. So those certifications and so forth are very useful in that regard. We are still a skill-based industry, and so the representation of the specific skills that you have to offer will be different from employer to employer because of their applications and how it is they're using the technology. The reason, I think, that one of the reasons that we are surprised, and certainly pleasantly surprised, at the Department of Labor numbers in terms of forecasting what is coming down the pike is the fact that geospatial technologies are being used in literally all industries right now. So this is not just a mapping applied technology, set of technologies anymore. It's being used in many different ways in all industries. So the toolkit that you bring with you as you continue in your career is going to be useful in many directions and allows for much flexibility in terms of planning your own career. I would certainly be open to Q&A at this point.
Yep, and thanks, Rich, and thanks, David. And while we get ready for Q&A, we just want to take a moment to put up a slide and talk about the upcoming webinars in this particular series that we're hosting jointly with Directions Media. So Penn State and Directions Media are really pleased to announce on December 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern, we'll bring an expert panel from the geospatial intelligence field. And we're calling this particular webinar a paradigm shift in geospatial intelligence with a question mark. And I'm not at liberty yet to announce the panelists, but we've got that almost solidified, and that should be a really exciting webinar with Todd Backestow, who's lead faculty here in our Geospatial Intelligence Certificate Program. And then this coming spring, we're going to be looking at research innovations at Penn State's GeoVista Center and visualization in our field. We're hoping to put together a panel across a number of programs in terms of professional master's degrees in GIS. And then a lot of you have been having questions as I've been kind of skimming through the question block about how are we really going to prep everybody for this huge growth in the industry. And David's mentioned, and maybe we'll come back to this in the Q&A, the National Geospatial Technology Center for Excellence, which is hoping to apply the competency model to other arenas of education, including the community college level of the education system. So we've got some exciting topics coming up, but those are in the future. And we know you have questions today, and we've got quite a few lined up. So assuming we're ready, Joe, for the first question, I'm going to hand back off to you, and Joe and David and Rich are going to take the Q&A from here.
Great, thanks, Wes. Yeah, we do have quite a number of questions to get to. So let me just start off a question from Frank. I'm new to GIS. Where should I be looking for entry-level positions? Maybe Rich, you want to take that?
Yes, I would point Frank toward a couple of different directions. One is the entry-level person is very likely going to find his or her first job on their own or through connections that they may have through their school programs and also friends and colleagues, because the entry level are positions that are not often advertised, and certainly recruiters are not hired to find very often entry-level staff members. The other, so direct introduction to agencies and commercial companies in terms of who you are and shaking hands with someone with a specific company in your area is very important to do. Also internships. We see a dramatic increase. Matter of fact, we've been in discussions about how internships, paid internships in particular, have seemed to have replaced what we used to call entry level for many companies and some public agencies. We have an example right here in Colorado Springs where we have as many as 50 what we would call entry-level people who are actually there on a paid internship basis and also earning college credit for the work that they're doing. Many of these people will be offered permanent full-time employment eventually, but internships are critical in terms of how you can get a leg up in the industry.
Fantastic. Let's take this question from John. Each worker or job is classified in only one occupation. Employers and workforce analysts need to decide what each employee's primary job duties are. I guess that maybe that's a question for Rich about classification of jobs.
Well, the classification of positions, I think the DOL model is going to be useful in making those a bit more clear. We have always used, in terms of just our working terms, GIS technician as being that entry level, first 0 to 3 years kind of experience, without programming skill and so forth. And then we go to GIS specialist, which may have an applications focus, may require some programming ability. The same with analysts, increased knowledge and experience in analysis functions. And then we get into scientist and developer, which requires a much higher level programming and development activity. So I believe that this new competency model will help us a bit in terms of how we define those categories.
Here's a question from Mary. I develop curricula for GIS certificates and associate degrees at a community college. What resources are available for us so that our curricula prepare students to meet the DOL competencies for lower level GIS technicians? David?
Right, well, yeah, this is David. That's a great question. I mentioned earlier that the Geotech Center worked with the Department of Labor to help bring the Geospatial Technology Model to closure. What it did immediately next was to create an assessment instrument based on the GTCM that allows schools at all levels really, and not just schools, but training organizations within companies too, to assess how well their curricula align with workforce needs as identified in the GTCM. So you can go to the Geotech Center website, and in the resource repository there you can find freely available curriculum assessment worksheet. And what I answered one question already, prospective students at higher education programs should insist when they inquire, they should insist to see those self-assessments. They should insist that schools perform the self-assessments and that they share the results with prospective students. This is all brand new, so most educators frankly haven't even heard of this yet. This is breaking news. But the people who are on this call who are now aware of this should insist that schools offering certificate programs or degree programs related to geospatial, they should insist that those schools perform the self-assessment and show the results so that you can, as a consumer, so that you can tell how well that program addresses workforce needs.
Thanks, David. And this from Ryan. How does this competency model reflect on the GISP designation program? Is it tied in at all to this model, make it more substantial, or slightly undermine it?
Well, if you don't mind, I will take the question as this year's president of GIS Certification Institute. I was involved in the development of the GISP certificate program from back when the ERISA Certification Committee started work on it in about 1998, 1999. And I was there when we developed the portfolio-based certification criteria that currently exist, and that was launched in 2004. At that time in 2004, there was no Geospatial Technology Competency Model, and there was, in the judgment of that committee, there was no legitimate basis for developing a competency-based a competency-based certification that involved, say, an examination. Well, I can tell you, I will speak for myself, but as I believe it's true of many other of the volunteer professionals who work with GISCI, that many people now feel that there is a legitimate basis and that GISP certification should, in some fair way, in some reasonable way, over a reasonable period of time, should be upgraded and strengthened to include an examination that is based in some fair and reasonable way upon the GTCM and related work in that area. Very good question, by the way.
Here's a question, David. Do the Department of Labor numbers include GeoIntel, or is this considered to be a separate profession?
No, I think they're meant to include GeoIntel. You know, the way it works is if there are firms who include GeoIntel professionals. And if they, when reporting back to the Census Bureau and the Economic Census and to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, if those employers categorize their employees as, if they previously categorized them as what was called computer specialists all other, which is where GIS people used to lurk before these new occupations were created. If they were classified in that way, then a portion of them were reapportioned to the new occupations. That's where these estimates in part came from. So to the extent that GeoIntel was already represented in that previous job classification, it would be partly at least represented in the new one. The fact is, though, that these 2008 estimates are just baselines. They are educated guesses, and the good news is that now that the occupations exist and employers can use them to designate their employees' roles, then it's reasonable to expect that the estimates will improve and will converge on accuracy over time. So it may very well be, and I think it's the consensus of this group, that the estimates that we see might be overestimated by a factor of 2 or maybe even of 3. But they're not off by an order of magnitude, and it's still a very, very large number, and we can expect that over time that those numbers will converge on reality.
Great. Here's a question perhaps for Rich. Are you seeing positions requiring knowledge of open source software such as GRASS?
We are not seeing that. I did see, we do see resumes with people who are familiar with GRASS and MOS and some of the other older GIS technologies, but no, in our work day to day, we're seeing the usual suspects in terms of ESRI technologies, MapInfo, and others that are commercially provided.
Thanks, Rich. David, maybe you could address this one. Do you have any advice for getting the U.S. Department of Labor or other data on jobs per metropolitan region? Have they broken out the jobs geographically, I guess is the best way to put that?
Right. Well, I was just glad you asked that one, Joe. I was just trying to type out an answer to it, and it's easier to talk. So that's great. Well, first of all, I'd say that all of the DOL ETA estimates that I've seen have been aggregated at the national level. There may well be estimates at different scales, but I'm not aware of them. I would also like to point out that for those of you who are in graduate programs or thinking of going into graduate programs, this is a fabulous research opportunity now, and that is to be able to create a predictive model within GIS that predicts the distribution of geospatial job opportunities nationwide. One of the first things I'd suggest that you did if you wanted to do a modeling project like that is to talk to Rich Serby. Sorry, Rich, I didn't warn you this was coming, and to discuss what some of the factors are that affect the kind of the density of opportunities geographically. There's a, as Rich knows as well as anyone, there's a striking geographic variation in geospatial job opportunities. I personally have not seen that modeled. I've not seen that estimated in any predictive way, but that's a great opportunity for a master's thesis project right there.
Well, great. Thanks, David. And we are now at the top of the hour for our webinar, and it's great that nearly 400 of you have stuck around to answer this. Obviously, this is a very, very important topic given our current economic climate. I want to thank our panelists, David DiBiase of Penn State and Rich Serby of GeoSearch, and certainly our moderator, Wes Stroh, also of Penn State. We hope that all of you will join us for our next Penn State webinar, as Wes had said, on December the 9th, as well as our upcoming webinars from Directions Media on October the 7th and October the 13th. Again, you can find all of this information at the Directions Magazine website at www.directionsmag.com, and look for the top line menu item on webinars. Again, thanks for joining us today, and be sure to tell a friend about Directions. Bye for now.